Well, oh my goodness. I've been so looking forward to today's show because I have the distinct honor of hosting Dr. Kenneth Cooper, known around the world as the Father of Aerobics. You know, a lot of people know the term aerobics now, but they didn't. There was no word. It is now in the dictionary, and Dr. Ken Cooper is my guest today. So stay tuned.
Welcome to our podcast, Doing It Right. This podcast reveals authentic stories from successful leaders doing it right. It's about their journey to become a leader, their choices, motivations, and lessons. In essence, how they built successful personal brands. Your host is Valerie Sokolosky, author of 8 leadership books and nationally known as an authority on executive presence and personal branding. Let's get started. Here's Valerie.
Okay, before we start the show, I always have to thank Betty Ryder Boutique for the beautiful clothes and jewelry that I'm able to wear thanks to her wonderful selections that she brings into her shop at Preston Center, Northwest Highway and Preston Road in Dallas, Texas. You'll know the shop because it's the only one in the whole area that has that red door. So go in and please just tell the people inside you saw the show and you want to see the clothes, okay? All right, so let's just get going. Dr. Cooper, I have just so looked forward to having you on the show, but before we start, audience, I want you to know that Dr. Ken Cooper and Millie and their kids and my kids were neighbors. And so I remember moving to Dallas many years ago, and there was this thing called the Cooper Clinic. And I had no idea, nor did a lot of people then, way back, there was such a thing as aerobics. And so, Dr. Cooper, first of all, just tell us what that word means. And all of a sudden, how do you feel being known all over the world?
Well, first of all, you can find a dictionary published originally in 1986, Oxford English Dictionary. Aerobics is a method of exercise for producing beneficial changes in the cardiorespiratory system by activities which require only a modest increase in oxygen intake so it can be maintained. That's the official definition of aerobics.
Okay.
Aerobics wasn't invented by Jane Fonda. She came along until 1981. My wife says, be sure and tell them I'm the mother of aerobics, not Jane Fonda. But she, when she came out with her tapes, people started exercising. And I was asked on national television, what do you think about the tapes that she has? I said, I don't recommend that you exercise to the burn. Because exercise to the burn could be angina, could be heart pain. In fact, my standard rule, if when you exercise, it starts hurting, stop exercising. Don't ignore pain. Listen to your body, very important. So shortly after that, I got a letter from Jane Fonda, and I saw from Jane Fonda. I thought, lawsuit.
Uh-oh.
But to the contrary, she said, Dr. Cooper, you've been in the business a lot longer than I have. You made your mistake, I've made my mistake. Why don't we work together and see if we can make aerobic dance successful and safe? And we did. For a while there, we reviewed all of her tapes going through our Cooper Institute, our research institute. So that was my experiences short-term with Jane Fonda. But no, it's been an international word, but it actually created by the publisher that they titled the first book, Aerobics. I thought it was a new word. People couldn't pronounce it, they couldn't spell it. And they certainly couldn't translate it in foreign languages. And that's been true. The first thing, it's been a national bestseller. But in Germany, it came out as Bewegungstraining, which means motion training. They got well to get my 5th book, The Aerobics Program Total Wellbeing. That was Dr. Cooper's Gesundheit program, because Gesundheit means good health. In Russia, aerobica. No aerobics was translated Novaya aerobica. That's all I know in Russia. I think the French took the cake. They called it oxygen a la carte. So all different ways that has been translated to foreign languages. But praise the Lord, though, it has been successful. It's now used throughout the world. They've used it in schools. In fact, the Aerobics Program Total Wellbeing book has been used by universities in physical education classes. I know that for a fact. So it kind of revolutionized the concept of exercise being not just for athletes, but exercise as medicine. Exercise is for the general population. And that's the whole topic I'm discussing in my latest book, my 20th book, entitled Growing Healthy as You Grow Older.
Thanks for mentioning that, and I'm going to hold it up. I have read most of it, and I had particular interest in you growing up, and that's because you grew up where I grew up in Oklahoma City, and because Millie was around the corner from me when we moved here to Dallas from New York. And so I want to go to some things that maybe other podcasters have not. Ken, may I call you Ken?
Sure, please.
And that is your upbringing. Good old farm boy, and all the things that you learned from your dental dad and your mom that went to every sport activity you were in. In fact, right in there, mentioning your mom, something really interesting in the book that I read was how your mom kept you from, what was it? Getting a win or some? She kept you from what?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That was a dual meet we had at University of Oklahoma. And my colleague, by running the mile on the track there against this other team, and we're out there running. And she'd come down from Oklahoma City to Norman to see me run. And about halfway through the mile, but his elastic broke on his running shorts.
Oh, my goodness.
And so he had to hold them up and then run with one arm holding his shorts up. And so my mother came down with a pen and gave it to him as he ran by. So he pinned up his shorts, put his up, and he beat me in. I said, "Mother, you helped me be defeated by in the 1 mile run." And I was running that to me. That's a true story all the way. No, she supported me all the way. She saw me run the state championship, won the state championship in Stillwater, almost set a new state record. They missed about 1 second. And she saw me play basketball every time she could. But my father, to the contrary, never embraced the concept. Now, he did embrace some things in my life, in my early life, that had made me successful. And one thing is discipline. He did that. But I had my work requirements during the early years. I had to milk the cow twice a day, had to do that. My brother was much younger, and he'd take when I couldn't do it, he'd take over, but he couldn't milk the cow as well as I could. But the neighbors knew that when I was milking the cow in the morning, I would be singing, and they would hear me singing at 6 o'clock in the morning. They didn't like that, but always made the milk come down better, easier to milk the cow. That's in the book, too. Well, I had to work in the garden, and I had to do lots of work. We didn't have anybody that did any landscaping back in those days.
No.
I did that. So my father had my work requirements, and he didn't want me to spend too much time on exercising, like running track or playing basketball. So he never embraced my concept. But to the contrary, he discouraged me, because this was a popular theory back in those days. This is in the late 1940s is when this happened. And the same thing I was taught in medical school. You don't want to combine too much activity. You could exercise too much. In my first book, Aerobics 1968, I made the statement: you can exercise as much as you want if you have a good cardiovascular system, or it's marathons, wherever it may be, but just listen to your body. Later on, though, I changed. If you're on more than 15 miles a week, you're running for something other than cardiovascular fitness, because beyond that point, you get an increase in injuries. And finally, like we say in getting Cooperized, all you really want to do is get 30 minutes of exercise, collective or sustained, most days a week. That's 150 minutes per week, and that's what's recommended by American College of Sports Medicine. We didn't know that back in those days. So my dad thought that was being taught in medical school. If you exercise too much, you get an athletic heart. All we had back in those days was a chest X-ray. We didn't have the modern technology. We could see the enlarged silhouette of the heart with the chest X-ray, and they presumed that was muscle.
Oh.
And so the theory was that was muscle. And so as you increase your age and you finally give up exercise, the muscle converts into fat and you die early. And that was what I was taught in medical school. They didn't realize until the echocardiograms came along that wasn't just muscle enlargement. It was the dilatation of one of the ventricles, the left ventricle of the heart, that increased the ejection fraction. That's the amount of blood that can be pumped up with each stroke. It's the conservation of energy. That's what the good Lord provided for us to save, because it cuts down the resting heart rate from 72 for a man down to about 50, 45 to 50 in endurance athlete. Women 78 down to about 60. But each time the heart is beating stronger, it doesn't have to work as hard. And that's why endurance athletes are living longer. My father was so afraid of that, never supported, never watched me play basketball, never saw me run track, and he outlived him by 18 years. It's very sad, because I wish I'd have known then what I know now. He may have lived longer than 77 years. Here I'm in my 95th year.
You know, you said something before we started the show about what if, or if only. There's a lot of if onlys. Is there an if only in your life that you can go back and say, yeah, if only?
If only. One thing that comes to mind, that Dr. Cooper, if I would have told you, if I would have done what you told me to do 15 years ago, I wouldn't be in the condition I'm in today. And the truth about it, that is probably the truth. It wouldn't be. But if only too, in my presentations, I point out that one of the great benefits with you exercise regularly is it makes you feel good. You ask 90% of the people when I speak into a lecture group, how many of you are exercising? Hands go up. How many exercise because it makes you feel good? The same hands go up. And we published our over 700 papers published in peer-reviewed journals. A very famous one that showed that people are physically fit is measured by the time on the treadmill. They are less depressed. They're less for hypochondriac, improved self-image, and much more positive attitude towards life. Don't you want that?
Yeah.
And so the people realize, if only I had done what you said, I missed all those years of feeling good. And I've had people tell me, now that I've got in shape, I feel the best I felt in life. I challenge the viewing audience. If you don't feel good now, try something different if you're on exercise. You may be surprised to see that change that can be made in your life.
Well, you know, I'm a good example of that because I never exercised until I moved here and met a young lady that lives in the condominium. And I saw her down there exercising with a couple of women. I thought she was a hired trainer. And I went over and I said, well, can I hire you to train with me? And the rest is history, 3 years now with her almost every day. I'm a different person up here. I'm sure I'm a different person all
What
the
is
way.
good for the heart is good for the brain.
Yeah, yes, I totally get that.
I'm
All right.
with a personal trainer now
Are you?
because I ran for 40 years and 38,000 miles. Ran the Boston Marathon twice, as I've told you. But
Now
then
go back to that a minute. The Boston Marathon.
Boston Marathon
and
twice.
1 second.
62 and 63, 1962 and 63. And I placed 101st in the Boston Marathon. That was back in 1962.
Wow.
That sounds fantastic. Only 150 people ran it back in those days.
My goodness.
I remember back in those days, too, that we didn't have any shoes.
What?
In fact, the guy running the Boston Marathon ahead of me was running in thongs. We had the Cavs and basketball shoes. There were no running shoes. And then New Balance came out with the new shoes in Watertown, Massachusetts, and you would sit on a piece of white paper, outline your foot, and send it off to Watertown, Mass, and they would send a pair of shoes back to you. It cost $19.95. That's all it cost. But they had no heels, and so we had to pay some sponge rubber onto the heel to keep Achilles tendonitis. All had that. And they had nylon webbing of the toes. And so I found out, as you know from the book, that when I ran my first marathon, that there in Hopkins, Massachusetts, it was raining that day. And some of the veteran marathoners said, now, if you take your socks off, then if you don't take them off, it's going to slow you down. But your socks get wet, it's going to slow you down. And it made sense to me. So I took off my socks. Big mistake.
Oh,
By the time I finished, I had blisters like you wouldn't believe.
gosh.
And everybody had blisters except we had podiatrists at the finish line that took care of our feet. That's how bad it was as far as those shoes. I stood in line to get my feet evaluated by this podiatrist. He looked at my feet. And he asked me, son, where'd you get those blisters? I had those at the Framingham. That was at 7 miles on the 26 miles. Looked back to me and said, son, you don't need a foot doctor. You need a head doctor. That's my introduction to the first Boston Marathon. I did train, though, the second year by training at altitudes, working by Dr. Exercise Physiology, at sea level in altitude chamber. And so I gradually work up to 15,000 feet working out, 15,000 on a bicycle ergometer. And I dropped my time on the Boston Marathon from 354 down to 324. So I dropped it down by 30 minutes by training at altitude at sea level. And that was the top of my thesis I was working on for my second doctorate degree at Harvard. So again, it was kind of breaking the way because I had no reference, no textbooks to follow back in those days. Because exercise, I was taught about it because you don't exercise past 40 years of age. You have a heart attack, you have to move from a 2-story house to 1-story house. You can't walk up and down a flight of stairs anymore. And it was restrictive. Don't be something stupid like exercise. I mean, I was taught that. So when I came out with recommending exercise for people of all ages, I mean, the wrath of everybody was on my back. It's just going to be full of dead joggers as people follow Cooper. Cooper's going to kill more than Hitler did in World War II. But the truth of the matter is, as more people started exercising, we had 150,000 exercisers. The book came out in 1960. We had 34 million by 1984. And we still have about 30 million joggers in America today. And heart disease is going out, not up, just exactly opposite of what they predicted. So that was a divine intervention in my life because I was out on a limb there making recommendations. I didn't have that much data. In fact, the way I got the information for my first book, 1968, was for 4 years preceding that time, I worked with 27,000 in the Air Force, worked with 27,000 men and women at 5 Air Force bases, 15,000 exercises and 12,000 in control. We're trying to develop the aerobic point system, which is very important in the book, and the 12-minute test. We designed a field test of fitness that correlates with the laboratory test we assessed on a treadmill. And that's what made it successful. In fact, when this book was pumped out, we talked about the 12-minute test, which is it's all over the world now, that was a scientifically developed test. And it came out in the Journal of the American Medical Association. And in June of that year, that came out in April, verifying the validity of the 12-minute test. Now that's used all over the world. In fact, in the book, we also worked with the Brazilian World Cup soccer team back in 1969. They helped them win World Cup, much was say 1970. And we used the 12-minute test to see how well they performed. And so in the first test, they averaged 1.86 miles in 12 minutes. And that was one before, that's April 1969. In the last test before April 1970, they got from 1.86 miles in 12 minutes to 2.3 miles in 12 minutes. And they wiped out the competition in the second half. They're in such high level of fitness up at 7,200 feet there in Mexico City. They won 6 consecutive matches and winning retired in the World Cup. But if you go to the internet and ask what's the most outstanding, best World Cup team ever in the history of World Cup, and it was the 1970 team that we trained in Mexico City. But it wasn't just because they were trained by Claudio Coutinho, who implemented the Cooper method for the training, because we made them run 20 miles a week, rather just in addition to their soccer, but because they had Pele playing for them, the most famous soccer player of all time.
Absolutely.
So that's all in the book in detail. We've had a lot of comments. In fact, a request from England. They wanted to send a gentleman over to give a podcast with me, and he wanted to find out why did Brazil beat England in the 1972 Tiger Cup, 1972 World Cup in Mexico City. What was the secret? I was going to tell him they used the Cooper method. That's what it says on the internet. It's exposed us to many things. One thing in the book too, we looked at elite athletes. And we looked at 20 of the top world-class athletes. They came from everywhere. And Frank Shorter was in the group, and Steve Prefontaine, people like that, and tried to determine if we could predict the winner of a distance, a 6-mile run we had for them. And so we had investigators, 3 or 4 different investigators came in, do such things as muscle biopsies to determine if you're genetically endowed to become a world-class runner. We had psychiatrists doing interviews. These guys have been running 100 miles a week for years. And why can't someone do that for so long? And he came to the conclusion they were stupid. It was ridiculous. No, he came to the conclusion they were highly disciplined, was the thing. But we found, for example, in trying to, are they born or are they made? That you should have a lot of slow twitch fibers if you are an elite athlete, a distant athlete. You have fast twitch fibers if you're a sprinter. Well, I had only 45% of my muscle in the biopsy of my leg was a slow twitch fibers. The rest of these guys had 80% slow twitch fibers. But there's a guy who had less than I had, and his name was Don Cardone. And he had only 40%, I had 45%, but each one of his slow twitch fibers were twice the size of anybody else. And he placed 4th in the Olympic Marathon in 1976 in Montreal. So again, he didn't have the genetic predisposition, but he had the desire to train enough that he had overtrained, you might say, but he's able to place 4th in the Olympic Marathon.
My goodness.
So again, they're born or they're made.
Or they're made.
So don't give up if you don't have genetics to become a world-class athlete. You can still overcome that with training.
Interesting, because a lot of times since a lot of this show is about authentic leadership, and a lot of times people will say, well, do you think leaders are born or made?
I agree, and they're made, I can assure you. Because if you ask what I did almost 55 years ago, coming to Dallas after 13 years in the military, with no money, no place to work, and I write medical society and all that, they tried to run me out of town, the Dallas Medical Society, because I was doing something as dangerous as treadmill stretch stretching, because that wasn't even accepted in Dallas back in those days. Fact is, I developed that along with my colleague Bill Thornton when I was in the Air Force and planning on going and become a scientist astronaut. But we had to work for NASA for 2 years to develop, number one, a treadmill technique where we could monitor EKG accurately, not get a bunch of just garbling for that, because they had to have ability to determine how fast that heart rate was, and that astronaut in space, particularly extravehicular and all that. And so Bill and I worked on that, and we have the technique that's now been universally. But we pursued that, and then the second thing we had to do, working with the astronaut, to design a conditioning and training program. It's all in the book. And we pioneered using bicycle training while they were in space. That's what we're doing at the present time. And so we've been able to, doing that, we've been able to overcome a problem that occurs with astronauts. They go into space, and they lose their baroreceptors. That's the ability to handle 1G environment that we have here on Earth. Because if you lose that, you stand up and you pass out. That's all there is to it. If they pass out in a survival situation, they could die. So we had to do something to maintain that baroreceptor. So we did some bed rest studies with these airmen. Had them lie in bed for a couple of weeks on their back, and they weren't even allowed to get up. It's almost barely to get up. But we had one half to exercise with the bicycle ergometer attached to the end of the bed. The other half didn't do anything. Then we used what's called the flax test, where you sit on a saddle and you sit up and just your legs aren't supported and blood starts pooling in your legs and you pass out. But we found the guys that exercise didn't have that tendency to fall out. But other guys did. And so that's the reason I'm using the bicycles in space. But again, working with Bill, and I was going to be assigned as astronaut, but I started in 1970. We'd been working for years on this. That this was a long-term situation there to try to get a flight into space.
Right.
And so I decided to give it up. And even the Air Force said, well, you're Lieutenant Colonel, you might become a general one of these days if you stay in. I gave it all up, started from scratch. He stayed in. It took him 17 years to get his first flight into space. Aww. So that was one of the epiphanies of my life. I wouldn't be here today if I had gone that route. But again, that embraced the concept of exercise, that we needed more research. And so when I did, that was the reason why it says these 25,000 people, we said 50,000 or so, 12,000 controls, and we developed the point system. But the point system, like we used with the Brazilian World Cup soccer team, all we wanted to get was 100 points a week. Now, keep in mind, there's 41 exercises in aerobics that classify as being aerobic, and musculoskeletal conditioning is not one of those. But tops on that list is cross-country skiing. We can't do cross-country skiing here in Dallas, but you can use Olympic. They have a ski master now that you can imitate. Right. You can exercise the same way on ski master. Number 2 is swimming. Anytime you get more muscles involved, you get more aerobic benefit. And number 3 is jogging or running. And number 4 is cycling. And number 5 is walking. So anyone viewing this podcast can utilize one of those 5 techniques to get that level of fitness. They can improve your level of fitness, but prolong your life. And that's the big thing we're looking at. We've been trying to prolong lives, quality of lives. And what we have is a study of 100,000 patients that came to our clinic, proving the value of coming to our Cooper Clinic here in Dallas at least 20 times over a 45-year period. We got their death certificate and found they're doing something amazing. They were squaring off the curve. They were living long lives to the fullest, and they died suddenly. How do you want to die? If I die tomorrow, praise the Lord. I've had a good life. But they were doing it by condensing the time of senility and senescence into a short period immediately prior to death. And here in my 95th year, and I have no signs of dementia or Alzheimer's. Praise the Lord, I'll say that. But they were enjoying life to the fullest. At an average age of our women, 90.4 years. Average American woman is 81 years, she passes away. And our men is 86.5 years. Average American man is 76 years. So their average is 10 years less than what we're seeing from our patients, which ranks us 47th in longevity worldwide. And why do we spend twice as much money as anybody else in the world on health care, ranked 47th in longevity? Because we spend way too much of our health service dollar on desperate measures that prolongs death, not life, a miserable few days.
Boy, that's a whole nother podcast, is what's going on in the healthcare industry. It's amazing and so wonderful that you're still so involved. And when I sat in your office, Dr. Cooper, and as you have been doing, you spouting out all these things and these statistics. And I mean, I think you could tell me what page something was on, but I'm going to hold this book up again because it's something that is inspiring besides the technicalities of it and besides the information about aerobics. I want to go to your faith.
Well, let me stop on that for a minute.
Yeah.
I want to point out the 3 important things in this book.
Okay.
And number 1 is your health is your responsibility. It's not the government, it's not the insurance company, or even your physician, unless he was trained in preventive medicine. Mm-hmm. And no drug can replicate the benefits of an active lifestyle. That's the first thing. Second, we're trying to resurrect the practice of preventive medicine for physicians. Physicians don't practice preventive medicine. It isn't taught in medical school. You can go to the American Academy of Applied Medicine now, and you can apply medicine, and you can become certified with that academy now in preventive medicine. When I was in medical school, I was taught that preventive medicine is the Cinderella of the medical specialty because there's no profit in health. The profit's in disease. And physicians are saying, I don't know anything how to do it. I don't have the time, but I'm not paid for it. That's the problem. So that's the thing. So trying to resurrect this special preventive medicine. They told me 55 years ago, you can't take care of healthy people and make ends meet. if you practice medicine in Dallas. Just wait and see.
Are you kidding me? They said
I'm
that?
telling you, you can't be successful in Dallas if all you're seeing is healthy people. Well, I said, if people realize they have a need, you provide a service, get the results they want, they'll make you successful in any field. And that's why 74% of our patients, the 150,000 patients in our database, are return patients. They come back because they're enjoying a quality of life they never realized could be available to them if they took care of themselves. So number one is you got to do it yourself. You can't depend on the government or anybody else. Number two is you got to embrace the preventive medicine. But number three, look at the facts. I've been trying for years to transition, to prove the value, transitioning from exercise as being fantasy to being fact, transition that bridge. And we've now got so much fact with over 700 papers published in peer-reviewed journals. The one just recently is the 29th of September, as I showed, just came out of a journal, which I was very pleased. First time we did that. The results are too impressive to be ignored. So now exercise as medicine is ubiquitous all over the world. Also here in Dallas, my little Tumum office in Preston Center. You mentioned Preston Center. And yes, that's where I started, a Tumum office in the Preston. Lots of problems, and lived there for the first 11 months of my life, where I moved out to 8.6 acres. But there was, you mentioned my faith too. There's a lot of things that's happened in my faith. And getting the property we have here on Preston Road, the 30 acres we have at the present time. Because a wonderful lady is Nichols, Clarice Nichols. And she was the one that owned the property. It's only 22 acres. She had developed, her husband had developed it over years. And the 2 lakes there, and the ducks, all that.
It's beautiful
property. 1 mile track, half-mile, quarter-mile track, and all that. But she didn't want to break it down. And I couldn't handle 22 acres. The best I could to get the money was getting 8.6 acres at $1.6 million. But she wouldn't turn it. She wouldn't break it down. Wouldn't sell it. And she turned us down twice. And the thought of a clear blue sky, I asked my agent, I said, why don't you ask her one more time about whether she'd sell this to us at this particular price? And he did. He said, just a minute. Is he the one that wrote the book on exercise? He said, yes. And said, for him, I will do that. Now, why did she do that? Because unknown to her, before I left the Air Force, Millie and I were asked by Howard Butt, H-E-B, Howard Butt, to go to Labor's Leadership Institute in Colorado Springs and give a testimony. And she was sitting in the audience. And she made the decision at that time, if she could ever help this young couple, she would. That's why she did. We have a dedication, a tree in our lockdown. Remember Mrs. Clarice Nichols. That's just one of the epiphanies of my life. But the big epiphany of my life, you read about in the book, is what happened when I changed from my plan of medicine. When I was running in high school and college, I weighed about 165 pounds. I was about 6 foot 1 inch in height. And so that was my running weight. But as soon as I got into medical school, I learned that obesity is the most common manifestation of stress. And so what do? You eat to keep awake at night, to make good grades in school. And so I didn't realize exercise was anything of this for athletics. I didn't exercise. Exercise is medicine back in those days. So I ignored my exercise completely. I didn't have time, quote unquote. That's the acronym we use why people have the excuse why they don't exercise. TEMMPF. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I don't have the money. I don't have the motivation. I don't have the place, and it's not fun. That's the excuses that they have. So I got into that mood. And so for 6 years, I didn't do anything except gain weight. I ended up weighing 204 pounds.
No way.
Totally sedentary during that time. Wow. I didn't know what I was doing. And so for the first time in many years, I tried a slalom course up at Lake Texoma. To get halfway through the course, and I was 29 years of age at the time. Halfway through the course, starting chest pain. And my heart was beating out of my chest. Give me this side. Give me this side. They got me to the side. By the time I got over, the heart pain had disappeared. The chest pain had disappeared. I already came back to normal. The next I was evaluated at the School of Race Medicine in San Antonio. And they said, Beth, you're on Duke. The only thing wrong with you is you're out of shape. You're pre-diabetic, you got hypertension. That's all what's wrong with you. That shocked me back to reality. I lost weight within 6 months. And we'd have GLP back in those days. I lost the weight within 6 months. And I started running my first marathon a year later. I run 40 years, I ran 38,000 miles. And I finally had to stop. Fitness is a journey, not a destination. But I broke my leg snow skiing, wiped out my skiing. I still have braces on it today. But I did give up exercise, so I transitioned to cycling, recumbent cycling. And so I'm going through a muscle activation technique now, because what has happened, I've given so much favor to my left leg, which is my strong leg, the quadricep muscle here. I was reducing the strength in this leg. And so you have imbalance, makes you likely to fall. You don't want to fall and break a hip and use. No. That's death in all the cases. So I'm working with the personal trainer now. I've been working with for several months, and I've regenerated muscle strength and nerve activity in this leg now. muscle activation technique. That's not supposed to happen.
At what age?
This is 94 years of age.
94. Did you hear that? 94 years old. That's
Yet I was taught in medical school, you lose mass, you lose muscle mass after 50 years of age. You can't do anything to change that. That's what sarcopenia is, what that's called. And not only have I increased the size muscle, strength of my muscles, I'm increasing my walking speed, and I've been able to balance the muscle in my legs so I don't have the fear of fall anymore. That's an answer prayer for me too, all the way.
Well, the things you're talking about for those of us who are past 50,
Yeah.
I mean, I find the tendency with some of the people that I have been associating with through the years, as age goes up, they go down.
Yeah.
And so
You don't have to.
no, I think that's, thank you.
This is the most productive years of my
Yes.
life
Yes.
in my 95th year.
Yes.
Think about that.
That's amazing. This is an inspiration. Like I said, this show is about doing it right, and it's also usually very inspirational. And you have made such major factual comments about, audience, if you're listening or watching, if you don't, it's almost scary. It almost is making me like, oh my gosh, I wish I had started this years ago.
Definitely.
And better pay attention because, as you said, we're
Listen to your
responsible.
body. Listen to your body.
And we're responsible for our
Right.
body.
That's right.
And one of your top takeaways is discipline. It takes discipline.
Proverbs 13:18. Shame and poverty come through not discipline. I want to remind the listening audience, the viewing audience too, that one of the favorite Bible verses I use in my presentations is Isaiah 40:31. Because those that wait upon the Lord renew their strength. They mount wings and soar like eagles. They run and not weary, and they fall and they walk and they don't faint. So it's there. That's the first verses of the Bible. We're commanded to do something for our body. Later on, it talks about we're bought with a price, glorify God in your body as well as your spirit. I've been writing these articles for Decision Magazine now for 5 years. I'm going to finish my one. This is the 30 I've done of these. Because Franklin Graham has asked me to do that. And the first article was published back in 2021. I'll get out in a minute. And it's for 5 years. And it was entitled, How God Has Had His Hand on My Life. And these things I've been telling you about just indicated that. So these epiphanies, things that made me change my life. I planned on leaving my internship in Seattle and becoming a specialist in ophthalmology. I had no desire to do anything else. No desire to do anything in preventive medicine or exercise. But when I had that epiphany in my life that changed my life, I thought, this is a field I've been studying. I'm going to specialize in something brand new. So I pioneered the whole subspecialty of preventive medicine that's becoming worldwide.
You know that, thank you for that, because that's one of the main aspects of things that stop people is the I can'ts, or it's the too lates, or it's well my age, or it's.
Exactly right. You talk about entrepreneurship. It's starting on a wing and a prayer and nobody, and I read medical science and all that, to an office and all that. And I had to go declare bankruptcy 8 to 91 and all these things. So it's going to be the ups and downs when you go from ground zero. I mean, I had to borrow money I didn't have and that kind of stuff. But first, the Tata Corporation here in town funded my first investment. Didn't charge me anything for 6 months. No payments, no interest or anything, because the late Joe McKinney had heard me speak. He asked me to speak to it with his. He was at a conglomerate to speak at Lakeway down in near Austin. And I spoke to him, and he was so impressed when he heard about aerobics. If you ever move to Dallas and need some help, you let me know. So I finally knocked on doors, couldn't do anything, and go back and, Joe, I need some help. And they gave me some help. That's the reason I'm here today. All these things shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have happened. But as I may have said before, but I'll repeat if I did. They would ask my wife, I wonder after all these years, been married for 66 years now to Millie, but we don't live that long. 66 years, been married to Millie. I said, I wonder why that I'm alive and 95% of my medical school classes already died. Because you said the Lord's not through with you yet.
Amen. And he's not. Dr. Cooper, you're amazing. And what I want the audience to know is just that people can become known all over the world. And here you are sitting as one of those known all over the world, I'm going to say legacy people. So honored again that you've been on the show. But what I want to say is the humility that comes from authenticity, which is what this show is all about, is having people like you on who are uber successful, and you've done it right. You've maintained that integrity. And in today's world, audience, that's just something not to let go on. You can still be very successful, and don't ever, ever compromise your values.
Don't quit.
And don't quit. Dr. Cooper, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being on my show and for
Thank you,
being my
darling.
friend and neighbor.
Appreciate it.
It's been great.
Thank
And I always leave with my little philosophy, and let me share with you what it is today, my VALERIE'ism. And it's this: stay true to your purpose. It's the compass that guides your path and the courage that fuels your journey. And so many times, Dr. Cooper, people will say, well, how do I know my purpose? I don't know my purpose. How can I find out my purpose? Day by day. What would you say if someone asked you that? How do you talk about purpose, Valerie? How do I know my purpose?
Read Bob Buford's book entitled Halftime. He talks about if people are not satisfied at a certain stage of life, stop, look at your life, do something new, go back to school, get more education, change your career. So because you can be successful, but not significant. Important point. I was successful in the military. I could have been perhaps a general officer, but I wasn't really significant. And that's why that epiphany changed my life. And now I would say the significance far exceeds the successfulness around the world. But listen, I want to finish this too by quoting one of my famous verses too. It's 1 Timothy 4:8. For physical fitness is all right, but spiritual fitness is what you need, because that prepares you only for this life, but the life in the hereafter too. I'm prepared. I hope the viewing audience is too.
How do you not just say amen, thank you, and wow? This is what the show is about, folks. So let me know, let us know, because I look at every single comment that you make in the show notes. And when it's about the guest, I sure pick up the phone or send an email or write a letter and let the guest know. So if this has been something meaningful for you, how will I know whether I want to keep going or not? If you don't tell me that this is impactful and that you're being inspired, or you've learned something, or it's made a difference to you in some way, how will I know unless you let me know? So please do that. You know my email, valerie@valerieandcompany.com, or just leave a comment in the show notes, and I'll appreciate that so much. And so until next time, just keep, as Dr. Cooper has said, doing it right. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening. To receive Valerie's voice, free monthly leadership tips, and to learn more about her leadership programs and coaching, visit her website, Valerie'sCompany.com. Next week, we'll be here again to inspire, engage, and equip you with teachable points of view from successful leaders who have been doing it right. Until then, lead authentically.